Welcome back to another episode of Waking Up with Wendy's. This is Adam Cohen, the Media Relations Coordinator and Broadcaster with the ValleyCats, and alongside me is Tom Thornton, the Pitching Coach and Scouting and Player Procurement Assistant for Tri-City. Tom, we've had a lot of discussions over the past year or so, but it's really good to interview you and have you sit down with us today.
Oh, it's good to be with you, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, you are probably one of the more interesting people I've ever met in professional baseball, player or coach. And I remember one of the first things I read about you was that you excavated Neanderthal tools in Israel. So, how did you even get to that point, and what's your, I guess, archaeological background?
So I was, well, that was another life of, when I was an undergrad, I was studying biological anthropology and did a lot of human evolutionary studies, and then I started to get more into archaeology when I turned down an offer from the White Sox in my junior year, and I had already thrown a lot of innings. So they said, don't play summer ball, and I had an internship at the Smithsonian Institute. So I went out to southern Colorado and New Mexico, and we did a lot of Paleo-Indian archaeological research, worked with some collectors, a lot of stuff between 8,000 and 12,000 years ago. So, you know, I spent some time doing that, and then when I went back for my senior year, I was in my human evolutionary studies. We had to write a senior thesis, and I was interested in Homo erectus fire use, you know, at over 1 million years old, and what the possibilities were. And so that led me to do a lot of stuff in East Africa. So I was doing some research in Kenya, and after the first season when I signed with Detroit, and then at the National Museum of Kenya, and then on 3 sites there, they had Kubifora, Chesawanja, and Olegasali, and there were 3 sites where there might have been not so much the making of fire, but the aspects of controlling it. And then it's funny because in my senior thesis, I had used this guy's research, a biochemist from the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot, Israel. And so I had contacted him, and he had a larger archaeological project going on, working at the Kabara caves in the Levant area, looking at Neanderthal tool use. And I came in to do a small part of some post-excavation research looking at microdebitage use. So the idea that the microscopic patterns of like flint knapping tools or things like that was an important archaeological piece in trying to figure out, you know, what Neanderthal tool use was like, you know, and they would map it out across the whole cave area that was part of a larger dig site for Neanderthals. You know, you're talking, you know, 15,000 years ago, 12,000, 15 to 20,000 years ago. So, yeah, so it was very interesting. So that lasted for, I guess, 3 months or so, 2 months, and then I just, you know, came back, and that was part of the baseball off season.
I think another really amazing thing about your baseball offseason, and even part of your season last year, so I know that you're an adjunct professor at Roger Williams University, and I'd love to hear you talk more about the class that you taught this past offseason, but you were already preparing for your course during last season while we're heading to the playoffs. So how were you able to manage both of those at the same time? And then going back to my original question for that, what classes do you teach, and what's a class like?
Yeah, so, well, I teach anthropology of religion. I teach an introduction to anthropology class. I teach it kind of a lecturer position at Bridgewater, at Roger Williams, and I have a kind of just an adjunct early college position at Bridgewater State. And yeah, you know, the prep work, it takes a lot. Sometimes the hardest thing is just getting the course ready, because I hadn't taught. One was an anthropology and religion course, and my dissertation was in a lot of work in prisons and you know, the anthropology of American Protestantism, and so I hadn't taught a broader sort of survey course in the anthropology of religion. So, you know, it takes some time to think out like how you want to map out the readings and what you want to draw from, and what are some of the sort of, you know, quote unquote canonical readings that you want to include, and then what do you want to go into, because it can't be everything. So, and then, you know, how do I want it to align up with certain assignments? So, you know, you spend a little bit of time on it every day, and the accretion of which you end up with a syllabus, and then it goes from there. But, you know, my courses, you know, like I tell the students on day one, you know, you got to really embrace the reading think the reading is the most important thing. And you know, you have to expect more from your reading than just entertainment, right? Like, you know, it's got to be something that's going to mark you and affect you and something. So I try to, they're very high stakes when you read, and it demands a high level of engagement. Now, as time has gone on, I've definitely assigned less and less, and we've tried to get deeper into fewer things for students. And that's been good, but I'll never trade that off. You know, that's part of the work of the course for the student, is very much to develop a practice of deep reading, and as part of a larger commitment to a deeper intellectual life. Yeah, the class is never supposed to be an exercise in conversion to become an anthropology major, but you know, they all have these questions, and you know, what is the nature of religion, and how are we to think about other kinds of spiritual life or higher powers, and how they interact with extant forces in the world writ large, you know, politics, capitalism, these kinds of things. And so they come in with a lot of questions, so we sort of tease those out, and then we put them down, and we say, okay, you know, we have too many readings on the syllabus, so let's just pick and choose something for each class that kind of fits where the question is. So there is a kind of part of customizationism. But then there are aspects of like, look, we've got to read this and have a discussion about this or that text. And so you kind of put it together, and you give them some assignments where they can come in and engage. And of course now everybody wants group work, and so we get little group work assignments in there. But yeah, mainly it's got to be about content, it's got to be about reading, it's got to be about a deeper question about, hey, what are going to be my intellectual commitments in the world? And how do I develop a deeper sense of political critique through taking college classes? And so that's what I really want it all to feed into. Whether they become an anthropology major or not, I mean, it's nice if they do. Most don't, though. So.
That's incredible. Obviously, you've put a lot of thought into your teaching, and it seems like you have a really personable relationship between you and your students. Do you see any similarities between coaching and teaching?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, yes, there is. I mean, there's definitely some points where it breaks down, but I'd say absolutely. There's a lot of cross specificity between, you know, working with pitchers and working with college students. And, you know, I'd say one of the deepest things that I try to work on with both is a deeper sense of narrative about how they see themselves in relation to this practice or this enterprise, being a student, being a pitcher, right? Like, these are ethical commitments in the world. I think it's important to see them that way. Right? It's not just guys out on the field throwing a ball around and then, you know, we're going to go play and we'll see what happens. Right? That on one level, that's what's going on, but at another level, these are, you know, ethical embodied commitments to a certain kind of becoming, right? You know, what does it mean to become a baseball player, to become a student, to take up a course as a discipline, right? The initial idea of a discipline is itself a very embodied practice, even within a discipline like anthropology or sociology. And athletics is a discipline, right? You know, you're out, especially in baseball, where it's the only sport where you have a full practice before you play the game every day. You know, for a major league season, 162 times. For us, 96 plus times, you know? And so that has to be, it can't just be, you know, well, I have fun doing this, or this is something I enjoy. There has to, I want to excavate down into the deeper parts, right? Of like the kinds of commitment this means for you to make in the world about being a baseball player, being a student. And ultimately, the question of, hey, I like that class, or I like this when we do this activity in the field. I would say that ends up being kind of superficial, right, to the actual work of the season or the work of doing the semester. Both, they're grinds. Right? Like they both have the grind to them. And I try to, a good teacher is like a good coach. Hey, there's no magic wand, baby. You know, I mean, I can't make the grind disappear. Instead, both a good teacher and coach, I think the best ones I had, they know exactly how hard the work is, and they're here to help you through it. They're not here to somehow magically alchemate it into this process of fun, whatever that may be. Because there's serious work to be done. Like there's a lot on the line, right? You know, like, so it isn't about making it fun necessarily, right? It's about really going after something and understanding what's truly at stake in the work we put in as a student. You know, now my students are writing their finals, you know, and it's not just an exercise, right? I tell them, hey, see yourself as a writer, you know, making a kind of intellectual contribution to an ongoing conversation that's been going on for thousands of years, right? And you're here to make, you know, to say something about that based on an array of a variety of texts. And it's the same thing with baseball. When you take the field, you're part of a tradition that stretches well back into the 19th century about, you know, becoming what it means to be an athlete and what it means to play and compete and go after something that's been evolving, you know, since at least the 1840s, right? And so, you know, that means something. And baseball's had different places in you know, what it means in the struggle to achieve an American life. And none of that is evacuated from the scene when you pick up the field and go do your work every day. So I try to bring all of that to bear as a way of actually getting through the difficulty of a season or the difficulty of a semester.
Tom, thank you again so much for your share. There's really so much that we can take away from that, from personhood to citizenship to being a citizen of the community to tradition, and how baseball and also how students are going to take what you've taught them out into their own lives, but also into their lives outside of academia and outside of baseball. So I really appreciate you sitting down with me. And once again, this has been another rendition of Waking Up Wendy's. We will see you next time, and thank you again for joining us here at the Suite Level, presented by Quick Response. Wendy's serves breakfast every day from 6:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Download the app to earn rewards and receive great offers for delicious breakfast combos, such as the bacon, egg, and Swiss croissant combo and the 6-piece homemade French toast sticks combo. Thank you for watching Waking Up with Wendy's, and we will see you next time.